Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov continues his Latin American tour in Mexico after visiting Cuba on Wednesday. The Argentinian Senate approves a law to restructure the country's huge debt. And protests against the French government's pension reform continue. From the headquarters of Telesur English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm Cristina Escobar. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov is meeting on Thursday with his Mexican counterpart Marcelo Ebrard on the second day of his Latin American tour, after which he is expected to hold a press conference in Mexico City. Lavrov's Latin American tour started on Wednesday in Cuba, where he met with Cuban Foreign Minister Bruno Rodriguez Parrilla. The encounter served to strengthen bilateral relations between Moscow and the Caribbean island, while both ministers expressed their commitment to enhance economic cooperation. And the Russian Foreign Minister's Latin American tour will conclude in Venezuela on Friday. On arriving in Caracas, Lavrov will meet with his Venezuelan counterpart, Jorge Arriaza, before meeting with Vice President Delcy Rodriguez, as well as Economic and Finance Ministers Tarek El-Aissami and Simon Serpa. The Russian Foreign Minister is also scheduled to meet with members of the National Dialogue Roundtable in the context of Russian support for a negotiated solution to the political situation in the country. Lavrov will also meet with President Nicolás Maduro in Caracas to discuss further cooperation in energy, mining, transport, agriculture, and defense. 250 Venezuelan migrants returned from Peru as part of the Return to the Homeland Repatriation Plan. The Venezuelan nationals who were in a situation of vulnerability in Peru returned to the country on Wednesday. Many traveled to the Andean nations seeking a better economic situation for their families, but were confronted with a very different reality. Almost 17,000 Venezuelan migrants in several countries, including Argentina, Brazil, Chile, and Colombia, have benefited from the Return to the Homeland Plan. The plan was created by President Nicolás Maduro and establishes an air and land bridge for the voluntary return of all migrants who, due to a lack of resources, are unable to return to Venezuela by their own means.
I wanted to find a job and to help my family in Venezuela, but that was impossible. There is a lot of xenophobia and hate. There are no jobs, and if you do find one, they'll ask you a lot of questions. My son wasn't able to go to school. It didn't meet the expectations I had.
The Supreme Court of Justice of Venezuela filed charges on Wednesday against former Colombian Senator Aida Merlano at the request of the public ministry. Attorney General Tarek William Saab confirmed during an interview with Blue Radio that the former senator has made her statement about the legal proceedings against her in Colombia. On Tuesday, Saab pointed out that Merlano was captured by Venezuelan police in Zulia State while carrying a fake ID under the name of Landis del Carmen Ferrer. In 2018, Merlano was sentenced to 15 years in prison in Colombia for corruption and illegal possession of weapons. The former senators remain in custody under supervision of Venezuelan judicial authorities. Workers of Brazil's state-owned energy company Petrobras continue indefinite strike action against the closure of a fertilizer plant in the southern state of Paraná that will lead to the loss of 1,000 jobs. Unions say the strike, which began on Saturday, is in protest of the layoffs at the plant, as well as the Brazilian government's privatization drive, while also accusing the company of failing to comply with the collective labor agreement. The strike has already met with threats of repression. On Monday, 120 riot police and 32 police cars were deployed at the gates of the Duque de Caxias refinery in Rio de Janeiro. More stories coming up. We're taking a break. Don't go away.
Acompañamos a los pueblos que resisten en cada una de sus luchas.
Somos esa ventana que se abre para visibilizarlos entre fronteras.
Thursday, only on FtS World.
Welcome back. Meanwhile, Argentina's Senate unanimously passed a law granting broad powers to Alberto Fernandez's government to restructure the country's massive debt. Argentina is grappling with about $100 billion in public debt. $57 billion alone are owed to the International Monetary Fund. The Senate unanimously approved a bill to allow the government to take the necessary formal steps to restructure the huge debt inherited from the previous administration. The new law was approved as President Fernandez concluded his tour of Europe in search of support for the negotiations with foreign creditors and the IMF.
Argentina has the will to pay, but to be able to pay, the country needs to generate capacity for growth and also needs to fulfill its internal debt, which is enormous.
In Bolivia, 8 candidates have been registered to run in the May 3rd presidential election. The de facto government and the 7 other candidates are hoping that a right-wing party or alliance can block the mass candidates from winning the ballot.
With the closing of the registration for candidates in the May election, parties which participated in the November 10th coup are now dismissing concerns about the political persecution which only one of the 8 competitors face, the movement towards socialism.
This is a democratic electoral challenge between adversaries, not between political enemies. The people will decide at the ballot which will be the best option.
Over the weekend, Evo Morales' power of attorney, Mrs. Patricia Hermosa, was arrested, and the documents with which she was to inscribe Morales as Legislative Assembly candidate were taken. A judge ordered that she be held in preventive detention for 6 months. The Supreme Electoral Court also prefers to look the other way.
The electoral organ is conducting a clean electoral process, a transparent electoral process, and we are making an appeal to all actors so that they situate themselves within the rules, within the laws, and that we all work to carry out the electoral process.
In this election, they are once again saying all against the mass. In this case, all are parties which played a hand in the execution of the coup. They have set April 3rd as a date, 1 month before the vote, for the possibility of uniting the 7 right-wing candidates. They hope to be favored in the polls in order to stay in the presidential race.
On that date, we will take into account the statistics of the government, and also each party is going to have its own statistics. With that, we are going to start to compare, and with that, we all need to enter into this knowing that if not one, then maybe 2 parties will remain to fight against communism.
Meanwhile, the movement towards socialism has opted to internationally denounce the harassment and political persecution taking place within the country.
We are denouncing the harassment that our main delegate is experiencing at the Supreme Electoral Court. It's one more shame under this de facto government which doesn't want us to participate in the elections, which will continue to have a hostile attitude towards the mass IPSP, or social movement leaders and former officials of the government.
As soon as the designation of Luis Arce as candidate of the MAS was made known, Arce was immediately included as accused in a judicial case which was opened 4 years ago. Now, with the proliferation of cases of political and judicial persecution, the United Nations has sent experts in electoral processes and human rights defense to Bolivia.
The future Minister of Labor of Uruguay, Pablo Mieres, met with representatives of the Central Union of Workers to discuss labor rights and a law related to the sector. Union authorities expressed concerns over the ongoing proposal of an urgent law that will be presented to Congress by the government, a law that they say diminishes workers' rights. They stressed that the draft law limits the right to strike while also removing already established rights such as social security and collective contracts.
It is obvious that there are just a few days left to draft the definitive text of the urgent law, but there are multiple stages. There is a stage that is a bill which is being criticized by several actors of society and the political system, and we will have to wait and see in which final format it will be presented to Parliament. And then there is a stage that could last 90 days in Parliament. In this stage, we will continue working to transform the negative aspects, not just from this point of view. We should not forget this interview only refers to labor issues, but there are other topics related to labor, like the topic of public enterprises. There are other topics that have to do with our citizen coexistence, like security issues.
Bueno, la ratificación en relación a los consejos de salario, que ya se sabe cuál es la postura.
Well, in terms of the ratification of salaries, we are aware of the elected government's position on this. The clarification that the political and legal will of the government in the drafting of the article is strictly to establish the illegitimacy of certain occupations, and in no way does this affect the right to strike. There is an interpretation of the draft by the union movement that it could affect the right to strike, and we clearly stated that this was not the government's intention.
And we continue with news that are developing in the U.S. Counting is still on the way in the Democratic Party's chaotic Iowa caucus days after voting ended. Initial results indicated tight race between former mayor of South Bend, Pete Buttigieg, and Senator for Vermont, Bernie Sanders. However, the announcement of results has been characterized by chaos, apparently caused by a defect in the results reporting application. Iowa Democratic Party spokeswoman Mandy McClurg said on Wednesday that the app created for caucus organizers to report the results had malfunctioned. Now we're taking one last break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Opponents of the French government's pension reform returned to the streets of France on Thursday in a fresh bid to force President Emmanuel Macron to ditch the overhaul of the country's pension system. Thursday saw the latest episode in France's ongoing strike action, with demonstrations planned in several cities, including the capital. Protesters demand the government scrap an unfair and dangerous bill, which has become the key focus of the 5 left-wing unions behind Thursday industrial action. On February 17th, the reform bill will be subject to debate in Parliament, where Macron's party holds a majority. It is widely expected that the bill will be pushed through Parliament by the summer. Meanwhile, demonstrators are also gathered this morning in the capital of French Guiana, Cayenne, to protest against the pension reform. Negotiations between the Spanish government and the pro-independence regional government of Catalonia on the regional crisis are set to begin in February, according to Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez, who met in Barcelona with the Catalan president. No major breakthrough is expected in Thursday's meeting, given the opposing positions on the divisive issue of Catalonia's independence from the rest of Spain. Catalan Regional President Quim Torra had said before the meeting at the Catalan government headquarters in Barcelona that he would insist on Sánchez allowing a legal referendum in Catalonia's independence. However, Sánchez's government has said that a referendum is out of the question since it would violate the Spanish constitution. Sánchez is expected to try to steer the talks towards social issues, financing for Spain's region, and the impact of recent storms in eastern Spain. The death toll in mainland China jumped to 563, with more than 28,000 infections also confirmed in the world's second largest economy. The World Health Organization said on Thursday it was too early to say that China's coronavirus outbreak was peaking, but noted that Wednesday was the first day that the overall number of new cases in China had dropped. Chinese President Xi Jinping declared a people's war on Thursday against the fast-spreading coronavirus, whose impact has been felt around the world, from slowing factory floors to quarantine cruise liners. The Chinese National Health Commission chose to use a Cuban antiviral as one of the pharmaceuticals to fight the coronavirus. The Cuban-developed interferon alpha-2b recombinant is used for treating viral infections produced by HIV, hepatitis B and C, as well as different cancers. The Shan-Heber joint enterprise has been producing the Cuban drug since January 25th, one of the 30 pharmaceutical products chosen by the Chinese Health Commission to cure the respiratory infection produced by the novel virus. Chinese authorities say they won't allow the novel coronavirus outbreak to affect the country's economic development, adding that they are confident in the nation's capacity to resist both medically and financially.
China is fighting against a coronavirus epidemic that has so far killed hundreds of people, placing a spotlight on the world's second largest power as the international community and financial markets pay close attention to the impact on the country's economic development.
Let me emphasize that the coronavirus epidemic is a temporary one and won't change China's economic foundation, which is still expected to maintain fast growth. Many have made assumptions in light of the impact that the SARS epidemic had on the economy in 2003. But China's financial resources and emergency response capability have improved significantly since then. And as such, we are confident that we can prevent the spread of the virus and reduce its impact on the economy.
The government says China's economic reserves, the world's largest, provides a margin for authorities to implement stimulus measures that can mitigate the negative effects of the epidemic.
Judging from the information that we currently have, many foreign trading companies are quickly restoring their production capacity. All departments and local governments are also taking measures to help organizations reduce their losses while fighting the epidemic.
China has yet to reveal its growth goal for the year 2020, let it be adjusted given the current situation. But citizens remain confident that the economy will continue to grow, as it has done in years past.
The economy has been good even before these trying times, and it has the capacity to resist, and we know that this year will do better.
The coronavirus is not the only epidemic that China has faced in the last decade. It has had to overcome the serious acute respiratory syndrome SARS, H1N1, and the H7N9, among others. Today, the Chinese economy is 9 times larger than it was during the 2003 SARS epidemic. It's also more diversified and resilient.
And a third person in the United Kingdom has tested positive for coronavirus, England's chief medical officer reported on Thursday. Chris Whitty said a further patient has tested positive for coronavirus, bringing the total number of cases in the UK to 3. British authorities confirmed the individual was not infected with the Chinese virus in the UK. China's ambassador to the UK has made a call for Britain to take an objective, cool-headed approach to the coronavirus outbreak, saying, "We don't think it is a good idea that the UK advised all of its citizens to leave China." A 19-year-old Palestinian student has been killed by Israeli security forces while protesting against the demolition of a house in the occupied West Bank city of Jenin. Abu Tabik was shot in the chest when he attempted to stop soldiers from demolishing the house of a Palestinian prisoner who Israeli authorities accuse of being a member of Hamas. The incident happened a few hours after Israeli soldiers killed a 17-year-old boy in the city of Hebron during protest against U.S. President Donald Trump's so-called Middle East peace plan.
They took a decision to demolish the house of Ahmed al-Kuba. Young men went out to the streets the same way they do with every demolition that takes place, and clashes started, and the Israelis started to shoot. The occupation bullets are shot towards everyone, so he was shot in his right chest.
Syrian air defense systems intercepted Israeli missiles over the capital of Damascus on Wednesday night. According to local media reports, the attack was launched from the occupied Golan Heights through Lebanese airspace. A senior military official said most of the missiles were intercepted before they reached their targets. He added that 8 members of the armed forces were injured during the attack. And on Thursday, we celebrate the 75th anniversary of the birth of Jamaican-born reggae legend Bob Marley. Marley was born on February 6, 1945 in 9 Mile, Jamaica. He died at the age of 36, 4 years after being diagnosed with melanoma. The reggae star also became a symbol of the fight for social justice around the world.
Don't give up the fight. Get up, stand up. Stand up for your rights. Get up, stand up.
And we've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And please join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter and Instagram for Telesur English. I'm Cristina Escobar. Thank you so much for watching.